I'm very pleased to be here and very pleased to, I suppose, set out the revision piece to the National Planning Framework in the context of what was raised actually this morning, and I suppose the underlying piece around the role that planning plays in enabling and creating the conditions for quality environment and therefore quality outcomes from a planning perspective, but from a sustainable growth and sustainable communities perspective as well. For those of you who may not be familiar with the National Planning Framework, we abbreviate it to the NPF. It has been around since 2018, and it is a long-term strategy framework prepared by government to inform and guide the development of Ireland from 2018, when it was published, out to 2040. And I'm just, I suppose, the map on the right is really important because at a strategic level and at a high level, one of the important policy objectives included in the NPF is around addressing the unsustainable patterns of growth and development that have taken place chronically. And the NPF, published in 2018, certainly included a strategy approach that was focused on, in the first instance, addressing more regionally balanced. So we hear a lot of the terminology around balanced regional development. And what we really mean by that, and it maybe speaks to some of what you had mentioned, Mary, around the equality and the equity and the justice piece, but really around effective regional development. So in preparing the NPF, which is the successor document to the National Spatial Strategy, if any of you can recall that, published in 2002, which was received quite well, but in terms of implementation and its approach to development wasn't taken to a degree of implementation as it was foreseen. So there were gateways and hubs identified in the NSS, but actually what transpired over the course of the NSS was the 22 towns and cities identified for growth. It was 22 other towns that were actually experiencing the levels of growth and development envisaged for the gateways and hubs. So NPF had a task to, I suppose, turn that oil tanker around. And on the regionally balanced piece, what was demonstrated, I suppose, over that period of growth was the dominance of Dublin and certainly the Mid-East counties in terms of where demand was arising for housing, but also employment opportunities as well. So NPF includes a piece and a strategy approach that aims to have a 50-50 approach to balanced regional development. And what that means is 50% of the population growth taking place in the Eastern and Midland Regional Assembly area, which is the area outlined in the green-blue, is to be matched by the population growth that takes place in the Southern Regional Assembly area and the Northern and Western Regional Assembly area combined. Now, that in the context of the trends that we have seen in terms of the development, some of the fastest growing towns in Ireland located within the EMRA area, this is a longer term policy ambition of government. And so the 50-50 piece really signals the role of our other regions, but also while retaining the primacy of Dublin as the capital of Ireland, obviously, and all that comes with that in terms of its potential to attract investment and to cater for growth, etc. It does also indicate the role of our regional drivers and our regional cities as well. So in terms of Cork, Limerick, Waterford and Galway City, actually from a policy perspective, been given that mandate to grow sustainably within its own regional area and to provide for that particular catchment. And that was very much, and I suppose as part of the revision, has been retained as a key objective to address that. And that obviously has a host of benefits across the board, which I'll come to. The other piece, I suppose the city focus piece, reflects on the other regional cities and their role in providing that counterbalance to the dominance of Dublin. And then the third piece relates to compact growth, which really, I suppose in layman's terms, refers to development taking place in the core of our cities and our towns and our villages, addressing the imbalance that we've seen, population decline taking place in our city centres, and reversing that, coupled with tackling vacancy and dereliction as well. So in other words, having the footprint of the most significant development taking place within the city and suburbs boundary. And that goes across the board. That's not just speaking, obviously, to the cities, but to settlements of every scale across the country. So just on the revision process itself, it is a prescribed process that took place. It was over the course of about 2 years, and government were legislatively required to undertake either a revision or a replacement. So there was a revision, and Laura alluded to her involvement this morning as a member of the expert advisory group who were convened to review the NPF published in 2018, prepare a report which included recommendations considered by our minister. And I suppose that was really the signal and the start of what was very much a strategic and targeted approach to what the revision needed to address, because bear in mind, it's not a full review. This is a long-term strategy that at the time of the formal revision commencing was only about 5 or 6 years old. Lots of policy to be rolled out across the various tiers of plan making. And so the revision took that into account to have a very strategic and targeted approach to some of the drivers, which I'll speak to now. The second piece, which was critical and obviously, I would say, dominated some of the revision process, was the clear increase in population growth beyond what was projected at the time of NPF 2018. And that was unprecedented in lots of ways. We saw the increase really I suppose, accelerating on the basis of the invasion of Ukraine in particular. And the ESRI we have worked with the ESRI on the NPF revision research pieces. So their previous area of research on this in terms of projections for population and housing demand was revised on that basis. And as a result, we are now working to an approximate need of about 50,000 new homes per year between 2025 and 2040. And I've a visual to kind of demonstrate the scale of that particular challenge shortly. The other piece, which is significant and speaks very much to why we're all here today, is around the integration of the Climate Action Plan targets, not just for the renewables piece. It was more the general piece around the crisis that we're seeing in relation to climate change and also in terms of biodiversity. So the revision process was very much focused on those two pieces. Public consultation nationally ran on the draft, which was placed on public display, and unlike the consultation on commercial sunbeds that received 10,000 submissions, the NPF attracted about 272 submissions, largely sectoral, all varying with different, I suppose, conflicting interests and not really consensus. There was, I suppose, a lot of the submissions focused on compact growth targets not being high enough, not addressing the infill and brownfield requirements to a significant kind of degree and urgency, with others asking for those targets to be removed and taken away entirely. Ultimately, I suppose on foot of that public consultation and all of the considerations taken on board and through the various approval stages and processes, there was a requirement for not only government to approve the NPF, but also both houses of the Oireachtas. So that happened in April 2025. And I suppose I just want to stress the importance of having a national plan produced by government, which clearly indicates the direction of travel, which clearly sets out the policies designed to accommodate the level of growth that's projected on the population side, where people are going to live, how we are going to plan our settlements, and what are the signals from government where prioritisation needs to take place. The NPF has over 108 national policy objectives. It doesn't just speak to the policy hierarchy within which it operates, which is from NPF to the regional tier of plan making and also to the local tier for our 31 city and county councils. It has a broader governmental role as well in terms of influencing policy. And I'll just briefly mention we had arranged our consultation piece very carefully and again very structured to ensure that our Planning Advisory Forum was established had a cross-sectoral representation from across the country, including the environmental NGOs, and we also had direct involvement from the likes of the EPA, the Prescribed Environmental Authority, with the supporting environmental assessments that were undertaken on the plan. So this, I suppose, the strategic environmental assessment piece, but also the appropriate assessment arising out of the habitats directive. So I've just put this up. It's an extract from the revised NPF, and I think with the narrative in that document, it's really trying to capture the value of the compact growth piece and speaking to the 15-minute city, speaking to accessibility to green spaces, to services, the walkability of where we're all living. And again, I suppose going back to that, bringing new life and footfall, but I suppose enabling that environment for walking and cycling and availing of the opportunities that blueways and greenways can provide in our settlements. I've mentioned the climate transition and the changing and diverse demographics has been two of the core drivers for the revision process, and I would still say that the regional development piece, digitalisation at the time, I suppose in a post-pandemic era, how we've all changed to living in terms of how we do work and business and our engagement online. So that was captured as part of the revision. And then one of the main messages coming out of the consultation, and I think just more broadly with our, I suppose, cross-departmental engagement, was the piece around investment and prioritisation as a means to actually implementing some of the more strategic matters. So actually, you know, while it's a strategy out to 2040, having a programme that supports delivery on a number of these items and these policies was identified as being very, very important. I mentioned the 50,000 homes per year additional to the stock. That figure also captures the pent-up demand piece. So basically where housing targets have not been met to date or delivered as expected, that figure captures that. So you're really talking about the equivalent of Galway City plus Drogheda every year between now and 2040. So that is the scale of development required to meet what is the projected population growth. This is an important slide because it demonstrates 10 national strategic outcomes, and I've highlighted this NSO 10 in particular because it does talk about quality childcare, education and health services. There is another NSO entirely devoted to biodiversity, environment, climate change, etc. But this is the bridging piece between the National Planning Framework and our National Development Plan. So, in other words, the investment piece to support the implementation of the NPF also includes these 10 NSOs, which really indicates that shared commitment to implementation. And I suppose we can point to this as one of the lessons learned from the NSS, where that supporting investment piece wasn't in place for the NSS, but we have a strong kind of binding approach to what those strategic priorities are. And again, with the interaction that we've had with the Department of Health as one of the members of our cross-departmental steering group, very specific input and contributions to flesh out and give the detail on what some of these national strategic priorities are from a health perspective. And I've just flagged some of them there. You can see the services for older people. As we know, Ireland has an ageing population. And I suppose knowing that information, how best to plan and capture that as part of this document, which was included, and there are specific NPOs included in relation to ageing people. I just want to highlight as well a couple of key pieces around the integration of development and mobility. So that concept of accessible public transport, accessible, safe places, attractive places to walk to take public transport to. And some of the measures that we've taken, I suppose, relate to the Compact and Sustainable Settlement Guidelines, which speak to the whole green and blue infrastructure piece, and When we talk about Section 28 guidelines, just for those who may not be familiar, these are ministerial guidelines which planning authorities and Commission Planola have to have regard to in their decision-making processes. So even down to planning application level, these guidelines are having an impact. The transport-orientated development piece, which was included as part of the NPF strategy, so flagging that there are those areas where investment is already taking place in strategic high-capacity corridors, particularly from a rail perspective, and signalling that they have capacity to cater for that growth piece. Just on the specific NPOs from the health perspective, and I know the Healthy Ireland framework has been referenced earlier, and that's been captured as part of the NPO within here, and I'll talk a little bit about how that travels through now before my time runs out. Creating the conditions is important, and I do want to, again, I suppose, get that message across that the revision has really focused on an expanded set of NPOs in terms of the protection of the environment, catering for renewable energy, and creating those conditions that allow for that engagement piece with quality environments. This is just an extract from our Strategic Environmental Assessment Statement, which was published within the last 5 or 6 weeks. And any of you familiar with this particular process will know that the measurement of the strategic environmental objectives is really important. So I've just extracted the population and human health one here, just to demonstrate going forward how the monitoring of NPF is to take place, and particularly from the health of the environment across all of the SEOs. So again, going back to what earlier speakers have said, the quality of the database and the evidence to inform that is so critical to being able to accurately capture progress. And then just the final point I'll make, Andy, before leaving, I just want to also point to how the NPF has enabled a stronger policy alignment across government departments. So again, through the ESRI joint research programme that our department has, we've been developing and in train with the work of Dr. Brenda Walsh, who has been developing the HHP model, healthcare and housing planning model. So it's creating a healthcare demand profile for new residential developments. That report was published last April. I have a link which I'll show now. But we're moving into phase 2 of that, which is designed to assist local authority planners and the HSE and Department of Health in terms of projecting for healthcare needs for new residential developments. So in other words, how you might model out, in the case of a primary care centre, what that workforce may look like. Conscious there's a lot of information within that, but I have shared the links here, and if the presentations are available, but also please do feel free to follow up afterwards.